Parece que a alguien se le acabó la gasolina. ¡Hey, muchachos!
Quickly? Now let's see. Oh yeah, I'll need a heavy, a bad guy to play the flop.
¿Será que eu estou sendo intrometido por acaso?
Hanna-Barbera built the empire that made Saturday mornings feel like religion. But buried underneath the Flintstones and Scooby-Doo is a vault of cartoons so wild, so bizarre, and so completely unfiltered that modern Hollywood won't even whisper their names. We're talking about shows where characters got drunk on screen, shows so dark they got yanked mid-season and scrubbed from rerun schedules like they never existed. And here's what makes this list different. These aren't just old cartoons that wouldn't fly today. These are 25 unfiltered Hanna-Barbera cartoons Hollywood refuses to touch. And once you see what Hanna-Barbera was actually putting on television when nobody was paying attention, you'll understand exactly why. Number 25. The Roman Holidays, 1972.
There you go, Mr. Holiday.
Thank you.
Hey, how come you're not watching the big ball game?
Oh, there's plenty of time till the kickoff.
Before the Flintstones ever made it to air, Hanna-Barbera seriously considered setting their flagship sitcom in ancient Rome instead of the Stone Age. That idea sat on a shelf for over a decade. Then, in 1972, with the Flintstones long canceled and Saturday morning ratings tightening across all three networks, the studio finally pulled the Roman concept out of storage and gave it a shot. And here's the thing. The Roman Holidays was an explicit attempt by Hanna-Barbera to replicate the success of the Flintstones. Same structure, same domestic frustrations, different toga. The studio's approach was methodical, almost corporate. Isolate the formula that printed money, swap out the historical skin, and sell it again. The production budget was around $30,000 per half-hour episode. On paper, the talent behind this show should have guaranteed at least a fighting chance. William Hanna and Joseph Barbera signed on as executive producers. Composer Hoyt Curtin returned to score the series, and they brought in Dom DeLuise to voice the villainous landlord Mr. Evictus. The voice cast also included Dawes Butler, Pamela Ferdin, Stanley Livingston, Shirley Mitchell, Hal Smith, and Dave Willock. But here's the thing. Hanna-Barbera was producing so many cartoons by this point that 60 Minutes had compared them to General Motors. And the budgets reflected that factory mentality. The Roman Holidays opened and aired just 13 episodes, grossing just $390,000. Number 24. Inch High Private Eye, 1973. Inch High Private Eye hit NBC in September 1973, and the entire show was built as a cartoon riff on Get Smart. The total production costs ran approximately $325,000. Behind the scenes, the show carried serious creative firepower. Iwao Takamoto served as creative producer. The supporting voice cast reads like a who's who of 1970s television. Jamie Farr was recording episodes while simultaneously playing Corporal Klinger on MASH. Ted Knight lent his voice between takes of The Mary Tyler Moore Show. That caliber of crossover talent reflected a brief window when Hanna-Barbera could still attract primetime names to Saturday morning projects. But the gimmick that made the show memorable also strangled it creatively. A detective who shrinks has exactly one trick. Every episode followed the same loop. Inch gets small, Inch gets into danger, Inch grows back at the worst possible moment. Inch High Private Eye ran only 13 original episodes on NBC Saturday morning, generating around $416,000 in licensing income. Number 23. Devlin, 1974. In 1974, Evel Knievel was not just famous, he was arguably the biggest celebrity in America. His nationally televised motorcycle jumps accounted for 4 of the 20 most watched events in ABC's Wide World of Sports history, including the #1 spot. Ideal Toys moved over $125 million worth of Knievel-branded merchandise between 1972 and 1977. Every kid in America wanted a stunt cycle set, so Hanna-Barbera did what Hanna-Barbera always do. They chased the trend. The result was Devlin, a Saturday morning series about a motorcycle daredevil named Ernie who traveled with his 2 younger siblings as part of a circus act. All 3 were orphans. That single detail immediately separated the show from everything else in the Hanna-Barbera catalog. This was not slapstick. This was not a comedy. Devlin was one of the studio's extremely rare attempts at genuine animated drama during a decade ruled by talking dogs and bumbling villains. The production budget was around $18,000 per episode. And here's the thing, the original pitch was even more aggressive. The show was initially titled Wild Wheels, and the lead character was called Daredevil. ABC killed both. Network executives feared the series would glorify dangerous stunts, so they changed the character's name to the harmless Ernie and mandated that safety tips be inserted into every single episode. Devlin aired for only 16 episodes before it vanished. Total estimated lifetime revenue was $1.1 million. Number 22. Squiddly Diddley, 1965. There is a Hanna-Barbera cartoon about a sea creature held captive in a marine park called Bubble Land who desperately wants to escape and become a famous musician, and nearly every episode ends with him either being dragged back to his pool or voluntarily returning because the outside world is too harsh. That is the real premise of Squiddly Diddley, which debuted in October 1965 as one of 3 rotating segments on NBC's The Adam Ant/Secret Squirrel Show. The production budget was around $312,000. The voice cast was top shelf. Paul Frees played the title character. John Stevenson voiced Chief Winchley. Despite that pedigree, the show generated almost no commercial footprint. Squiddly made exactly 1 comic book appearance in 1966 as a backup feature in a gold key issue of Secret Squirrel. Hanna-Barbera did attempt to cash in on the mid-60s surf music craze by releasing a vinyl LP called Squiddly Diddley's Surfin' Surfari in 1965. But the album was a novelty product that disappeared almost immediately. Squiddly Diddley opened and earned roughly $858,000 across the full run. Number 21. Ricochet Rabbit and Droop-Along, 1964. When Mel Blanc's exclusive contract with Warner Brothers expired in 1960, it was the most significant free agent move in animation history. He had voiced virtually every major Looney Tunes character for decades. He was also the first voice actor ever to receive on-screen credit. Hanna-Barbera immediately brought him in, and one of the projects he landed on was Ricochet Rabbit and Droop-Along, a Western comedy segment that debuted in 1964 as part of the Magilla Gorilla Show. Its production cost was embedded within the $4.2 million combined budget for both Magilla Gorilla and Peter Potamus shows. Allocating proportionally, with Ricochet occupying approximately 1/3 of one of those 2 shows. Behind the scenes, Don Messick voiced Ricochet, a hyperactive sheriff who bounced off walls and buildings while chasing outlaws through the town of Hoop and Holler. Blank played his deputy. The entire Magilla Gorilla package was bankrolled by Ideal Toys, who embedded their sponsorship directly into the music. It was corporate branding disguised as children's entertainment. Number 20. Peter Potamus and His Magic Balloon, 1964. Peter Potamus hit syndication in September 1964, and it ran for 3 seasons and 27 episodes. The cast was staggering. Dawes Butler voiced the title character by channeling a dead-on impersonation of classic Hollywood actor Joe E. Brown, while Don Messick played his sidekick So-So the Monkey. And here's the thing, Peter Potamus ran as a companion to the Magilla Gorilla Show, and both were underwritten by Ideal Toys, who laced their brand name into the closing theme songs of every series they sponsored. But the production budget was brutal even by Hanna-Barbera standards. Backgrounds were recycled across episodes. Walking animation looped endlessly. Entire scenes relied on close-up shots of a single talking head because animating full-body movement cost exponentially more. The strategy worked well enough for ABC to pick the show up in January 1966, but no one would call it artistry. Number 19. The Hillbilly Bears, 1965. In the early 1960s, rural comedy was the most bankable genre on American television. The Beverly Hillbillies was pulling nearly 60 million viewers per episode. The Andy Griffith Show and Green Acres were dominating their time slots. So Hanna-Barbera did what any animation factory would do. They took the trend, slapped it onto a family of cartoon bears, and called it Saturday morning programming. The individual production cost per 7-minute segment is estimated at $7,000 to $12,000. Behind the scenes, the voice cast was quietly loaded with Hanna-Barbera royalty. Henry Corden voiced Pa Rugg, Gene Vanderpyle, who was already immortalized as Wilma Flintstone, Don Messick played young son Shag, And here is a detail that tells you everything about how the Hanna-Barbera factory operated. Floral and Shag's voices and personalities were nearly identical to Judy and Elroy Jetson. Characters Vanderpyle and Messick were already performing on a completely different show. They recycled the voice performances the same way they recycled walking animation cycles and background paintings. The Hillbilly Bears aired, generating around $936,000 notionally across its full run. Number 18. The Secret Squirrel Show, 1965. By 1965, James Bond was the biggest cultural force on the planet. Goldfinger had shattered box office records the year before, and every studio in Hollywood was racing to produce spy content. So Hanna-Barbera created their own animated secret agent, a buck-toothed squirrel in a trench coat named Agent 000. Secret Squirrel debuted with a primetime special on NBC on September 12, 1965. It was the first primetime network special Hanna-Barbera ever produced, designed to introduce both Secret Squirrel and Adam Ant before their Saturday morning launches. The total production cost was approximately $500,000. The voice cast paired two of the most legendary talents in animation history: Mel Blanc, Paul Frees, Michael Maltese. That caliber of talent working on a Saturday morning spy parody was extraordinary. The villains were pitch-perfect genre spoofs. Yellow Pinky was a direct riff on Goldfinger, with Freeze delivering the performance as a Sidney Greenstreet imitation. The masked Granny, voiced by Jean Vanderpyle, was a sweet old woman who concealed an arsenal of weapons inside her knitting bag. The Secret Squirrel Show grossed around $1.8 million across all streams. Number 17. Sealab 2020, 1972.
And?
What do you mean, and?
I mean, and? What's that guy?
Alex Toth was a genius whose mantra was simplicity in design, and his vision for Sealab featured technically plausible undersea vehicles, state-of-the-art diving gear, and a level of scientific accuracy that was almost unheard of in Saturday morning animation. The show drew direct inspiration from the United States Navy's real-world Sealab underwater habitat program from the 1960s, and the entire series was built around environmental education and ocean conservation. But here's the thing. Sealab 2020 featured only black characters at a time when representation in animated television was virtually non-existent. Only 13 episodes aired before it sank in the ratings and was canceled. Number 16. Jabberjaw, 1976.
Where's that dumb shark that looks like me?
Jabberjaw was created in 1976 directly in response to the massive popularity of Jaws. The premise is based on a 15-foot talking amphibious great white shark who plays drums in an underwater rock band. Jaws made the world terrified of sharks. Hanna-Barbera made the world laugh at one. The series was created by Joe Ruby and Ken Spears, and was directed by Charles A. Nichols, with executive producers William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, and produced by Alex Lovey. This was not a scrapped-together budget project. Ruby and Spears had proven themselves as reliable architects of the Scooby-Doo formula, and Hanna-Barbera was investing in that pedigree again. The title character was voiced by Frank Welker. Welker was at the beginning of what would become one of the most prolific voice acting careers in Hollywood history, and his Jabberjaw performance demonstrated the range that would eventually make him the industry standard. But here's the thing. From the very beginning, Ruby and Spears knew the formula was getting stale. In fact, critics called it exactly what it was: a clone of Scooby-Doo crossed with Josie and the Pussycats, set underwater and riding the Jaws wave. And yet the show has fans to this day who remember Jabberjaw with genuine fondness. Number 15. Frankenstein Jr. and the Impossibles, 1966. This show premiered on September 10, 1966 on CBS, running for 18 episodes on Saturday mornings. The program contained two distinct segments. The first one, Frankenstein Jr., followed a boy scientist named Buzz Conroy and his giant robot companion battling supervillains. The Impossibles, on the other hand, presented three rock musicians who were secretly crime-fighting superheroes. The structure was a direct commercial hedge. Two completely different tonal registers, two different audience targets, packaged into one half-hour broadcast. The total production costs ran approximately $540,000. The voice casting was exceptional. Buzz Conroy was voiced by Dick Beals, his father Professor Conroy by John Stevenson, and Frankenstein Jr. himself was voiced by Ted Cassidy. And here's the thing. Casting Cassidy was a commercially smart move. He was a recognized television personality in the mid-1960s. His voice carried authority that no standard session actor could replicate, and Hanna-Barbera knew exactly what they were buying. Regardless, just 18 episodes of this show were produced across a single season. Number 14. The Herculoids, 1967. Alex Toth died at his drawing board on May 27, 2006. He was 77 years old. And among the dozens of characters he created for Hanna-Barbera throughout his legendary career, the Herculoids might be the most brilliantly strange of them all. The series debuted on CBS in September 1967 and ran for 18 episodes featuring 36 segments of pure, unfiltered science fiction combat set on a primitive alien world called Amzot. The total production costs ran approximately $630,000. The creature roster was extraordinary. The production values were high by the standards of limited animation. But here is the detail that made this show genuinely different from every other cartoon on television. Xandor and his family were explicitly anti-technology. They rejected it completely. They chose to live primitively. And Toth, who created and designed the entire world, refused to explain why. He would not discuss the backstory whenever asked. Even Hanna and Barbera may never have known the answer. That mystery was the engine of the entire series. When the Herculoids aired, total estimated lifetime revenue across all streams was around $2.2 million. Number 13. Dastardly and Muttley and Their Flying Machines, 1969. Dastardly and Muttley and Their Flying Machines debuted as the first of two spin-offs from the previous year's Wacky Races. The premise placed Dick Dastardly at the helm of the Vulture Squadron, a group of World War I-era aviators whose sole mission was catching a carrier pigeon named Yankee Doodle Pigeon. They never succeeded. Not once across 17 episodes. And here's the thing. The show's working title was actually Stop the Pigeon, and the theme song repeated that phrase so relentlessly that audiences often mistook it for the real name. In the original concept, the series didn't even feature Dastardly and Muttley. The initial designs centered on a heavy-set Red Baron-style pilot and a dachshund in flying goggles. When those characters failed in development, Hanna-Barbera pulled Dastardly and Muttley directly from Wacky Races and dropped them into the new format. Number 12. Wacky Races, 1968. Wacky Races was the #1 Saturday morning show in America during the 1968-69 season. It pulled a staggering 52% share in the ratings, and it was almost something completely different. The series was originally conceived as a hybrid cartoon and live-action game show, co-produced by Hanna-Barbera and Heater Quigley. The total production costs ran approximately $595,000. Behind the scenes, the voice cast was anchored by Hanna-Barbera's most reliable talent. Dawes Butler, Paul Winchell, Don Messick, Janet Waldo, Dave Willock narrated. 23 characters spread across 11 racing cars, all crammed into 17 episodes of pure slapstick chaos. On paper, that was a guaranteed hit. Then Peggy Charon got involved and everything changed. Charon, the head of action for children's television, publicly blackballed Wacky Races, charging that the original game show format would have enticed children into making monetary wagers on race outcomes. The accusation stuck even though the gambling element had already been removed before the show ever aired. Despite those ratings, only one season of Wacky Races was produced, generating roughly $200,000 in advertising revenue per episode. Number 11. Birdman and the Galaxy Trio, 1967. Birdman and the Galaxy Trio was created and designed by Alex Toth in the same furious burst of creativity that had already produced Space Ghost. Behind the scenes, Toth was designing characters for two competing networks in the same season. His mantra was simplicity, and his bold line work and minimalist character designs became the visual language of an entire era of television animation. The Galaxy Trio itself went through a dramatic transformation during development. Toth's original concept was called Gang from Galaxy and was heavily inspired by Star Trek. But NBC wanted something closer to what ABC was doing with Hanna-Barbera's Fantastic Four adaptation. So the Star Trek influence was stripped away, and the characters were converted into standard superheroes with individual powers. The show ran one season before the anti-violence backlash that was sweeping through the networks killed off the entire Hanna-Barbera superhero block. Number 10. Space Ghost, 1966. When CBS programming executive Fred Silverman looked at the Saturday morning landscape in 1966, he saw an opportunity that nobody else in television was chasing. ABC's live-action Batman had just appeared on the cover of Time magazine, and superhero fever was spreading through the entire entertainment industry. Silverman wanted an animated superhero block that could compete, and he turned to Hanna-Barbera's secret weapon named Alex Toth. The total production budget was around $760,000. And here's the thing, Toth created the entire Space Ghost from scratch. He designed the character, the costume, the world, the villains, and the visual language that would define Hanna-Barbera's action-adventure output for years. But when CBS saw the initial designs, they demanded one major change. They wanted Space Ghost to wear a Batman-style black cowl to capitalize on the Caped Crusader's popularity. Toth was furious. He argued that a black cowl would disappear against the darkness of outer space, making the character visually unreadable. His solution was elegant. He kept the cowl but surrounded the character's head with a distinctive halo of light, solving the contrast problem while satisfying the network. When Space Ghost debuted on CBS on September 10, 1966, just 20 episodes were produced across one season. Number 9. The Banana Splits Adventure Hour, 1968. The Banana Splits began life under the working title The Banana Bunch, after the Leo Burnett Agency in Chicago struck a deal with Kellogg's Cereals to sponsor an entire weekly hour of programming on NBC. They needed content, so they asked multiple studios for pitches. Hanna-Barbera knew every competitor would pitch cartoons, so Joe Barbera made a different bet. He proposed a live-action variety show hosted by costumed animal characters, something that had never been tried on American television. The concept was so unfamiliar that network executives kept assuming it was going to be animated. To close the sale, Barbera made an 11th-hour decision to bring an actor in a Yogi Bear costume into the room during the Kellogg's pitch meeting. It worked. Behind the scenes, Sid and Marty Krofft were hired to design and construct the character suits. The format was loosely modeled on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, mixing comedy sketches and songs with animated adventure segments. When the Banana Splits debuted, 31 episodes aired across 2 seasons, with Kellogg's branding baked into every frame. Number 8. Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, 1972. Between the Flintstones ending in 1966 and The Simpsons debuting in 1989, there was exactly one primetime animated sitcom that survived more than a single season. It was not a famous show. It was not a franchise launcher. It was a Hanna-Barbera production called Wait Till Your Father Gets Home, and most people have never heard of it. The total production costs ran approximately $1.2 million. Before production, producers R.S. Allen and Harvey Bullock saw enough potential in the concept to develop it into a full series, and a live-action version starring Van Johnson was also produced. The live-action pilot failed. The animated version succeeded. It premiered in syndication on September 12, 1972, and ran for 3 seasons and 48 episodes, making it the only animated sitcom to hold primetime real estate for multiple years during a 17-year desert between the Flintstones and The Simpsons. Behind the scenes, the show was explicitly designed to ride the wave of Norman Lear's All in the Family, tackling generation gap humor, countercultural tension, and the anxieties of suburban middle-class life with a directness that was virtually unheard of in animation. The show had teeth, it had controversy, it had the voice of one of television's most beloved actors, and it has never been released on any modern streaming platform, DVD, or home media format. Number 7. Speed Buggy, 1973. Mel Blanc was the voice of Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Barney Rubble, and roughly half of every cartoon character that existed in the 20th century. And in 1973, Hanna-Barbera asked him to voice a sputtering, sneezing, wisecracking orange dune buggy. Speed Buggy debuted on CBS in September of that year, developed under the working titles Speed Bug and Speed Bugs before landing on its final name. The production budget was around $352,000. Behind the scenes, Michael Bell voiced Mark, Arlene Galanka voiced Debbie, and Phil Luther Jr. voiced Tinker in a deliberate imitation of Jim Nabors' Gomer Pyle character. The show was built entirely from recognizable vocal performances layered over a familiar narrative formula. Iwao Takamoto, the man behind Scooby-Doo's design, served as producer. Only 16 episodes were produced in a single season, but then something unusual happened. Speed Buggy became one of the rare Hanna-Barbera shows to air on all 3 major American television networks. It ran first on CBS until 1975, then ABC picked up the reruns in January 1976 to replace the canceled Uncle Croc's block, and NBC acquired it later that same year to fill the slot left by another cancellation. When Speed Buggy aired, the total estimated lifetime revenue across all streams was around $1.5 million. Number 6. Hong Kong Phooey, 1974. Joseph Barbera deliberately hid the identity of his lead voice actor from the network. When Hanna-Barbera cast Scatman Crothers to voice Hong Kong Phooey, Barbera chose not to tell ABC who the performer was because he believed the network would not approve of a black man voicing the title character. Instead, he submitted the voice recordings without a name attached. ABC loved the performance. Crothers got the part, and nobody at the network knew the truth until after they had already committed. That behind-the-scenes maneuver is the most revealing detail about this show's entire existence. Hong Kong Phooey debuted on ABC in September 1974 as Hanna-Barbera's answer to the martial arts craze that had swept through American pop culture. The title character was Penrod Penry Pooch, a mild-mannered police janitor who transformed into a bumbling kung fu crime fighter by leaping into a filing cabinet. His cat Spot did all the actual heroic work and received none of the credit. Number 5. The Harlem Globetrotters, 1970. The Harlem Globetrotters cartoon was the first Saturday morning cartoon to feature a predominantly African-American cast, both on screen and in the recording booth. In 1970, 2 years after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Hanna-Barbera put a Saturday morning show on CBS built entirely around black athletes, black voices, and black cultural presence. The total production costs ran approximately $616,000. Behind the scenes, the voice cast was extraordinary. The show's formula followed the animated Globetrotters traveling to various locations, encountering local conflicts that inevitably led to a basketball game. And here's the thing. Fan interest in the Harlem Globetrotters as a cultural institution arguably peaked in the 1970s. In fact, by 1970, the Globetrotters had been performing for over 4 decades and had defeated the Minneapolis Lakers twice in 1948 and 1949, shocking the professional basketball world. The Harlem Globetrotters aired and grossed $2.5 million globally. Number 4. Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels, 1977. Hanna-Barbera recycled everything. Characters, animation, voice actors, story formulas. And by 1977, they had gotten so efficient at it that Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels was essentially built from the spare parts of 4 different shows at the same time. Behind the scenes, Mel Blanc played Captain Caveman with a manic, gargled scream that became the character's defining trait. And here's the thing. The Teen Angels themselves, Brenda, Dee Dee, and Taffy, were modeled after Josie, Melody, and Valerie from Josie and the Pussycats. The mystery-solving format was lifted wholesale from Scooby-Doo, and Captain Caveman's actual character design had already been used for the Slag Brothers in Wacky Races nearly a decade earlier. 1 character, 4 sources, 0 shame. The show was among the last Hanna-Barbera productions to use a pre-recorded laugh track. Number 3. The Amazing Chan and the Chan Clan, 1972. The character of Charlie Chan had been played in major film productions by Swedish actor Warner Oland, by American actor Sidney Toler, and by American actor Roland Winters. 3 white actors, across decades of Hollywood productions, voicing a Chinese detective while doing an approximation of broken English that the actual Chinese community found degrading. That was the legacy this cartoon inherited. And then Hanna-Barbera did something the film industry had never done in 50 years of Charlie Chan productions. They cast an actual Chinese-American actor in the role. Key Luke became the first actor of Chinese descent to voice Charlie Chan, and his portrayal was also the first time Chan spoke in complete sentences rather than in the stereotypical broken English featured in other adaptations. Behind the scenes, the animation work was outsourced to Australia to reduce production costs. Iwao Takamoto, the Japanese-American designer behind Scooby-Doo, handled production design. Jamie Farr was among the writers. But here is the impossible contradiction this show lives inside. It was the most progressive version of Charlie Chan ever produced, and it is still built on a character that many Asian Americans consider a foundational racial stereotype. The representation was genuinely groundbreaking. Number 2. Jonny Quest, 1964. Each episode of this show cost between $50,000 and $60,000 to produce. In 1964, that was an extraordinary sum for a television cartoon, nearly double what Hanna-Barbera spent on any of their other series. And it is the reason Jonny Quest only lasted 26 episodes despite being one of the most critically acclaimed animated shows ever made. Created by Doug Wildey and inspired by pulp adventure heroes like Doc Savage and Tom Swift, Jonny Quest was the first primetime animated drama in television history. It aired on ABC's Friday night schedule beginning September 18, 1964, and featured art so detailed, action so intense, and storytelling so mature that it redefined what animation could be. Wildey's character designs looked like comic book illustrations, not cartoons. Hoyt Curtin's jazz score sounded like a James Bond film. The opening credits featured gunfire, explosions, and a laser beam shooting across the screen. And here's the thing. The show's original working title was Quest File 037, inspired by James Bond's 007 designation. But the production budgets were unsustainable. Hanna-Barbera had built an empire on limited animation, and Jonny Quest demanded the opposite. One season and the show was done. Number 1. The Flintstones, 1960. A 90-second pilot was filmed in 1959 under the title The Flagstones, and Joseph Barbera spent 2 months in New York City in pitch meetings with networks and sponsors, facing rejection after rejection, before ABC greenlit the show on the very last day of the trip. The very last day. Barbera later said that if ABC had passed, he would have taken everything home, put it in the archives, and never pitched it again. But here's the thing. The Flintstones was originally targeted at adults. That fact gets forgotten now, but it shapes everything. The first 2 seasons were co-sponsored by Winston Cigarettes, and every episode of those seasons ended with Fred lighting a Winston for his wife Wilma while singing the product's jingle. The series ran for 6 seasons from September 30th, 1960 to April 1st, 1966, producing 166 episodes, and was the first primetime animated series geared toward adults, as well as the first animated sitcom. And that wraps up our journey through 25 Hanna-Barbera cartoons that Hollywood refuses to touch. From shows buried by their own budgets to shows erased by cultural shifts they never saw coming. If you made it this far, drop a comment telling us which Hanna-Barbera show you think deserves a second chance. And if you have not already, subscribe, hit that bell, and make sure you never miss a video. We will see you in the next one.